What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2020 Buick Encore GX. Huge thanks to Buick for providing me here with the all-new Encore GX to review for you guys today. So, about the GX version of the Encore. It is not a trim of the Encore. It's not even related to the old Encore. This is a totally new model that for some reason is given the same name as the old Encore. But anyway, it looks very nice regardless of where it came from. I think it's a very sleek look. Now, this is based on the same platform as the new Chevy Trailblazer, which I just reviewed recently as well. And I think this is definitely the classier look, of course, being the premium brand here from GM. You have these very nice LED headlamps, which are in this Essence trim, which is the top trim. Lower trims will not have the LED headlamps. You also have LED tail lamps though here on the Essence version. Also some nice little fog lamps there in the front. And I really like the front grille here with those kind of chrome wings that spread out from the Buick badge. I thought that was always a nice look here on these. And otherwise, it's just a very attractive vehicle. It's not too in your face or anything, but Buicks never have been. They're generally just very attractive looking vehicles. Coming down to the sides here, you have some nice and attractive 18-inch alloy wheels. I also like how you have this line that sharply creases right towards the rear doors and goes into the tail lamps there. And that's a really nice little detail. It kind of adds a little bit of extra spice to the side profile here of this vehicle. I also like that little chrome strip there on the roof that connects to the rear hatch, which is also a cool little detail. And then going out to the back there, this is where it's a little flatter and it's a little less character than what you get with the Trailblazer, which has more of a point and it's more stylistic with its rear hatch. This is, a little more middle of the road, but you do have some attractive tail lamps to go along with it. And, overall, it's a very nice and compact vehicle, but it is a couple inches bigger than the old Encore. So you have this, it's kind of bridging a gap. It's not as large as all the compact SUVs, but it's a little bit bigger than some of the other subcompact SUVs, which you'll see in the interior review as well. But overall, I think it's a pretty good look, especially here in this chili red color. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The Encore GX here has Buick's key, which is unique actually. It's not really shared with any other GM models. It's a nice key. They've been using it for a couple of years here. Just all the buttons there on the front. Pretty small key too, which I really like. And so overall, nice key. But of course, it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start here in the Encore GX. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. Also, if you want to hear about the interior in the Encore GX, my wife and I actually just did a full in-depth interior review on the Encore GX here, so I will link that above. You can go watch that if you want to hear all of our detailed impressions on this interior. Overall, it's fairly nice for this class of vehicle. Certainly not best in class though, especially since this one has a little bit of a higher price tag than some of the others. Alright, so setting off here in the Encore GX. So, the first thing you'll notice, you have a little bit of a higher seating position here, like, you're supposed to have in a subcompact crossover like this, but it's not super high or anything like that. And I honestly think that I felt like I was sitting a little higher up in the Trailblazer, just a tad, but it's probably very, very minor. But visibility is pretty good here in the Encore GX. It helps that it's so small, so it's very easy to maneuver. But you have a windshield that's nice and big, hood drops down nicely. You do have a thick A-pillar though, and you have the base of the A-pillar, you have where the mirror connects, and that's this whole block off area. But you're sitting up high enough. It's not a huge deal, not as big of a deal as it would be in like a sedan or something, but that still isn't ideal, and many of the competitors don't have a huge chunky base for the A-pillar there. Otherwise though, view out of the back is good, and this one has the optional digital rear view mirror, which I don't believe you can get in the Chevy, but it is available here in the Buick, and gives you this really nice digital view. So if you have things obstructing the back, you can see around that with just having a camera instead. And so that does sometimes get a little bit dirty in bad weather and things like that, but you can flip it down and have a normal mirror too if you'd like. And also setting off here, one thing that I'm noticing, so this one is the front wheel drive Encore GX with the 1.3 liter turbocharged 3-cylinder engine. And so that means you get a CVT transmission. If you had all-wheel drive with this engine, you would get a 9-speed regular automatic. This I have a CVT, and the 9-speed auto wasn't perfect, but I definitely prefer the way that felt in the Trailblazer over this CVT, which definitely is your typical CVT where it doesn't feel very natural, it just feels a little bit odd most of the time. And as we're coming to a stop here, the brakes are very predictable and do feel very good. But there is no sport mode here. There is one in the Trailblazer, but we don't have one here in the Encore, so we'll just turn on to this back right here and see how it does. And here we go. There it is. So it does have some lazy shift points, but whenever you're at like half throttle, that's where it'll just sit at like 3,500 RPMs and just, try its hardest. But yes, it's a 1.3 liter, 3-cylinder turbocharged engine. It does 155 horsepower though, and 174 pound-feet of torque, which is very competitive in this segment of subcompact crossovers. So as far as that goes, it's certainly not best in class, but not too bad. Now 0 to 60 is 9.3 seconds, and so interestingly, even though this has more power than some of the cheapest subcompact crossovers like a Hyundai Venue, which doesn't even have a turbo, it's a 1.6 liter in that, a 4-cylinder, but that still manages to do a faster 0 to 60 time than what you get in this. So I'm not sure if it's just these are a little bit heavier or something and that weighs it down. These weigh about 3,100 pounds here for the front wheel drive version. If you had all-wheel drive, you'd be closer to about 3350, something like that. So, it's a fairly light feeling vehicle on the road, for, again, a subcompact crossover, but it just never feels quite as punchy as you would think that much power should feel in a subcompact crossover. And I do feel like with a 9-speed auto that had like closer ratios and was a little bit more aggressive with its gearing, so that felt a little bit quicker in the Trailblazer. Now the Trailblazer wasn't fast either by the numbers, but it just felt a little bit punchier with that normal automatic than the CVT, which just kind of smooths everything over. It gives you a smoother experience, but it's a lazier experience as well, which I'm not a huge fan of as an enthusiast. But if you're just someone just putting around, you're never going full throttle, although you'll probably have to go full throttle at some point in this thing to merge onto the highway and stuff, because it's not, a lot of power, but again, for this class of vehicle, it's acceptable, and so, it gets out of its own way fairly well, and so no issues there, again, all things considered. Some other things, though, that I do really appreciate about the Encore GX are that it has, I think, a little bit of a smoother ride than the Trailblazer, and at least that's comparing it to the Trailblazer Active that I had, which had slightly more off-road ready tires, a slight off-road suspension tune. It's nothing serious, but, so this just has, more street-oriented tires and softer suspension setup here in the Buick, so I think that certainly helps the ride to feel distinctly better. Now, if I had a normal Trailblazer that didn't have the off-road stuff on it, maybe it'd be pretty close to this, but I also am noticing that this is a little bit quieter inside than the Trailblazer. That also could be partially due to the tires in those, but I'm not alone. I think even Car and Driver mentioned that they had about 2 decibel difference between this and the Trailblazer as far as how quiet it is. So again, we're not talking about massive, wild differences here, but there is, just a little bit more refinement here in the Buick. The interior is a tiny bit nicer, and so, overall there's just a little bit of extra polish here in the Encore GX over what you get with the Trailblazer, just a little bit. But we're coming up some corners here, and let's see how the Encore GX handles them. So, pretty basic suspension setup. We just have torsion beam rear, we have these 18-inch wheels, normal tires. Of course, this is not set up to be anything sporty, but, it handles itself really good. This is another thing I was really impressed by with the Encore GX here, is that it actually has a pretty flat ride to it. It handles itself really well for what it is. It kind of flows through corners as my camera gear goes flying there. It really just kind of is graceful with its handling, which I thought that it would be a little, more underwhelming than it is, honestly. I was pleasantly surprised the first time I took this thing around a corner. I'm like, hey, it's not half bad. They've really come a long way just in even the past few years with how this feels compared to, some of the older competitors, and even probably the old Encore, which I haven't driven, but this is just, obviously there's understeer there. It's nothing sporty, but it's really nothing to complain about as well. You just have lower limits for your grip and all that kind of stuff if you're an enthusiast that's used to that. But for the average person, this is going to handle like a dream. It rides very smoothly, and so all those things will give you a very pleasant, Buick-like ride. It is not premium as much as like a Mazda CX-30. Mazda has been the one in the past few years that's really come out as the top dog. They've really worked hard to really make themselves feel like a premium brand, and that certainly feels more premium. The ride is much smoother in the CX-30. You have more power in the CX-30. The interior is nicer. The handling is better. Everything that you touch just feels more expensive in the Mazda CX-30. And so as far as subcompact crossovers go, this is, nice. It's pretty good, but there's a lot to do handle really well too. The Hyundai Kona handles very well. Kia Seltos handles very well. And that, along with the Mazda, those are kind of my top picks in this segment. I don't think that this really, is going to overthrow any of those. I think it's competitive in some ways, but I still feel like, again, for people that don't care, this is going to be totally fine. If you like Buicks and stuff, this isn't going to let you down, I don't think. But, I just feel like you still can get a little bit of a sportier handling characteristic, a smoother ride, and a nicer interior, more features for less money in some of those competitors than you do in this. And we'll see how well it puts the power down with the wheels turned. There's some wheel spin there a little bit. It is a pretty torquey motor for being so small. 174 pound-feet of torque really gets this thing off the line, pretty strongly. But with this CVT, there still is a little bit of a disconnect. Every time I put my foot down, it just wants to send the revs like crazy, but you're not getting any forward momentum really. It's just, yeah, I would definitely get all-wheel drive. Most people want all-wheel drive these days anyway. I would definitely get the all-wheel drive. It is an upcharge, but if you're going to ever use all-wheel drive, get it just for the better 9-speed automatic. That alone is worth it. And you also, by the way, in the Trailblazer and in the Encore, there's an all-wheel drive button. So if you don't want the all-wheel drive all the time and you don't want the drain on your fuel economy, you can turn it off, and so you don't really get as much of a fuel economy hit. I mean, yes, it's a little bit heavier, but it isn't too bad. So personally, even if you're only going to use it every once in a while, if you can afford it, I would get the all-wheel drive again for the better transmission. As far as safety tech here in the Encore GX, they do a pretty good job of giving you a good amount of standard equipment. So you have automatic emergency braking, and actually blind spot monitoring is standard, which is a very nice thing because a lot of companies do make you pay extra for the blind spot monitoring. So it's nice that they give you that, but the trade is that you don't get adaptive cruise control in this, and some of the other competitors will give you that for free. So that's kind of your trade-off there. Personally, I think I would use blind spot monitoring more than I would use adaptive cruise, so I'm okay with that trade. But if you do want to do the adaptive cruise, you do have to pay extra as part of a technology package that I think is about $1,800 or so, and is one of the packages that does drive the price of these up a little bit higher. But the nice thing is, if you don't want to bother with that, you don't have to, buy it, and then you can just, have a more simpler and lower priced Encore GX. Also, as part of this technology package, you also have a head-up display, which is nice to have, but this one uses a little plexiglass screen that it's not actually projected onto the windshield, and Hyundai does this as well, and I don't like it in that either. Mazda, thankfully, with the new CX-30, does have it actually projected onto the windshield, so that's another advantage that the Mazda has if you like heads-up displays. Thankfully, if you don't want this, you can turn it off, or you can just not get the option package, and so when you turn it off, then that little panel will go away, which is good because it does kind of get in the way of your vision, and it's kind of odd. It's almost like you're wearing a pair of glasses at the end of your nose or something. So I'm not in love with that, but if you do like that feature, it's nice they offer it. But as you can probably tell, we're up at some highway speeds here, and it still is fairly noisy in here. Again, the Mazda is quieter. Outside of the Mazda, I think this is probably going to be one of the top picks in that regard. You have a little bit of wind noise around the mirrors there, and you still get some road noise and stuff in here. It's not going to be as luxurious in here as, I don't know, like maybe a Lexus UX or NX or something like that, but those are a little bit more expensive and larger. Also, one thing to note about this adaptive cruise system, because I am out on the highway here now, and I have the lane keeping assist on, but basically it's a lane departure warning that kind of nudges you every once in a while, but it does not take over steering or even try to take over steering as much as some of the other competing vehicles. So especially the Hyundai and Kia, especially the newest like Kia Seltos, that has the highway drive assist, and that will actually do a lot of the steering for you. Now, you still have to keep your hands on the wheel and pay attention, of course, but that is much more active in trying to steer, and it's not perfect still, but that can handle most steering, and that does take some fatigue out of your driving on long highway drives if you do have that feature. That is kind of nice to have, whereas this system here in the Encore and in the Trailblazer, it kind of likes to bounce around, and it kind of pogos back and forth in between the lane and basically drives like you're drunk if you just let it do its own thing. So I personally, obviously, again, you do have to always be in control with these systems, and this is nice if you happen to not be paying attention, and it'll kind of warn you and nudge you a little bit. It's better than nothing if you like the assistance, but thankfully you can turn it off, and it will remember that you turned it off. All these buttons you press, it'll actually remember between key cycles, so you don't have to keep turning it on or off every time. Whatever setting setting you have it on, it'll stay on that setting, which is nice that it does that. But yeah, it's not the best system out there as far as, lane keep assist systems go. Not the best by a long shot. I'd say most of the systems out there that competes with this are probably going to be at least as good, if not better, than this system. Another thing to mention here about the Encore GX is its fuel economy. So it's EPA rated at 30 in the city, 32 on the highway, and 31 combined. But in my driving, now I did do a little bit of idling, which made me lose about a half an mpg, but I'm still at 26.4 mpg, so maybe we can round up to 27, but that's about it. And that is still 3 mpg less than the city rating. And I didn't do much highway driving, just a little bit. It was mostly stop and go and suburban, back roads kind of driving. But I mean, even in my worst, performing vehicles as far as fuel economy goes, I'll usually get 2 mpg less than the city rating. This, I'm, 3 or more mpg less. And so it's a little bit disappointing with that. I think it just goes back to these turbocharged engines. The Trailblazer didn't do great either. It's just whenever you have that turbo cooking and, you're trying to use that acceleration, it just kills fuel economy. So if you're going to drive with a very light foot and you never accelerate hard, you might be able to see those types of fuel economy ratings, or if you do a lot more highway driving. But if you're doing city driving, you're not going to get the city rating. At least in my experience. Your experience may be different, but that's just, what I noticed here with mine. And that was over about 92 miles of driving, by the way. So as you drive more, it might come up a little bit, but it's been hovering at 26, most of the time I've been driving. Hasn't really gone much higher or much lower. And the last thing to mention here about the Encore GX is its pricing. So this one, as tested, which again still has front wheel drive, does not have the all-wheel drive option, but this is the top Essence trim, has the technology package and 1 or 2 other packages, but still does not have a panoramic moonroof, or any moonroof at all for that matter. This one is about $33,650. And that is the problem with the Encore GX, is it's just, from an MSRP standpoint, it's just priced way higher than most of the competitors. You do get a little bit more room. The backseat space, you might get 1 or 2 extra inches of legroom over what you get in most of the other competitors. So it has one of the biggest back seats, and it has a couple other features you can't get in some of the others, like the digital rearview mirror, if you care about that. Heated steering wheel is also something that's very hard to come by in subcompact crossovers. This has that. So there are a couple small features that if you're really crazy about those features, maybe it's worth the price upgrade. But even the Trailblazer, which is basically the same vehicle as this, with all-wheel drive and that having leather and stuff still, that one was still about $32,000. So you're still cheaper than what you have here in this. That's the tough thing about this. Now, the thing with any GM vehicle is they love doing high MSRPs and then giving you these massive discounts so you seem like you're getting a great deal. And so even on the build and price tool for the Encore GX, I went on there and they're already knocking like $3,200 off of this. And they're famous for doing these 10, 15, 20% off MSRP sales and stuff. So, obviously you're not going to pay MSRP for any subcompact crossover, at least you shouldn't. You'll be able to talk down everybody, but it just seems like GM gives more liberal discounts than what you get from some of the competitors. So from an MSRP standpoint, this makes absolutely no sense in my mind. But with the discounts, depending on what kind of discounts you're getting, it could end up making more sense. It just comes down to your deal. That goes for any car though, but it seems like you might have an easier time getting more money off on one of these than a lot of the competitors. And so, that's why it's kind of hard to compare this. But even if we take into account, give it the benefit of the doubt, take off $3,200 off of this price tag, you're still looking at basically a $30,000 crossover that has no all-wheel drive, that has no moonroof, and it's a tough sell because you can get a fully loaded Mazda CX-30, which again, I think is better in every single way, aside from the fact it doesn't have a heated steering wheel. That, you can get one of those fully loaded for like $29,500. And that has more power, by the way. And if you want also like a Kona Turbo or a Kia Seltos SX Turbo, those have way more punch, the extra cylinder, the all-wheel drive. The Kia, for example, has a 10-inch touchscreen display. It's massive, a really nice interior still. And those fully loaded are going to be like $29,000. So even with those discounts versus an MSRP of the competitors, all the competitors still undercut this. And then they get discounts as well. You're not paying sticker price for a Hyundai either. And even if you do appreciate the extra space here in the Encore GX and that you think that is worth paying extra money over some of the other subcompact crossovers, you have to also look at the compact crossovers. You know, you can get a Honda CR-V, which has all the options this does, for the same money. And it can be like a fully loaded touring CR-V, not a base model or anything. You can get like a loaded up CR-V with a heated steering wheel, leather seats, all that stuff, for basically the same price, like $33,500. And then again, if you want to factor in the discounts here on the Buick, you still can get an EXL version of the CR-V, for example, for, you know, $31,500. So you get way more space in the CR-V than you get here in this, way more cargo space, basically the same fuel economy and stuff. And so whenever you start bringing in the compact crossovers, that also, this kind of falls short even with those as well. So there isn't really any niche with the Encore GX where it makes sense, again, with the pricing that Buick has given it. So this is my problem with the Encore GX. In a bubble, in a vacuum, this is a nice little vehicle, and I can see that this makes a lot of sense. And, you know, Buicks do have a reputation for depreciating as well. So, you know, if you're looking at one of these used, you know, it could again be a very solid value because it is a nice little car. The pricing is just whack. And so that's the only problem here with this, is the pricing is just a little bit goofy. And I just wish GM would, you know, have MSRPs that are, you know, a little bit more realistic and don't rely on so many incentives. But that's what they do, so I can only really compare these cars by their MSRP, and by that, it just falls short of the competition. And so, unfortunately, that's the sticking point here in the Encore. Otherwise, there's nothing really wrong with it. I've enjoyed my week, you know, cruising around in it. It's a nice little thing to go to the grocery store in, going back and forth, running your errands. It's all very pleasant, you know. There's nothing that really upset me. Yes, it's slow, and yes, it's, you know, a little bit annoying with the CVT, but, you know, as far as a daily driver for the average person that's not an enthusiast, this is a totally fine little car. And they did a good job with the engineering of it. I just, you know, wish they'd fix the pricing. But anyway, that's all my thoughts here on the Encore GX. Let me know your thoughts on the Encore GX in the comments below. Thanks to Buick for providing me here with the Encore GX to review for you guys today. And anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.